Hey guys, I'm Greg Atkinson, and I am here with our children's ministry panel. This is our fourth First Impressions Conference, and every year since the very beginning, we have always done something with kids ministry because it is such a vital role in the church, such a vital ministry, and a healthy, vibrant church. And as you may guess, it is a impression that people leave with when they come to experience a new church on a weekend. And so when I wrote Secrets of a Secret Shopper, one of the chapters was on children's ministry because it's that important. And so today we're here with another panel of experts like we try to put together every year. And I'm excited about this panel. So first, let's just go around and just introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're from, how long you've been doing what you're doing. And just for those that may not know you, introduce yourself and let us get to know you. And so, Tom, start off and tell us an introduction.
Hey, my name is Tom Bump, and Greg, thanks. It's an honor to be with you guys and to be with Dale and Trish, my good friends. So it's always fun to get together with them. We'll have a good time with this discussion. I live in Ohio and am currently the founder and director of KMC Coaching, which is a ministry coaching group that reaches out to churches and children's ministry, student ministry, family ministries, offer coaching and consulting to churches, one-on-one coaching, group coaching, and have also just going to be launching by the time this conference goes a brand new ministry for leaders that have been hurt and wounded in ministry called Restoring Leaders. It's a ministry that's going to be offering retreats and online care groups for leaders to help them get back in and stay in the ministry game for the long haul. So that's what I do. I love doing it. Been married for 33 years and been in ministry for that long. Started in ministry and then got married, really. Just love being around the church and helping the body of Christ grow.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to that new ministry. We definitely need it. Anybody that's been around for a while knows how much that is needed. Trish, tell us about you.
Hi, my name is Trisha Peach. I am the author of Your Children's Ministry from Scratch and a couple of other children's ministry books. I do a lot of traveling. I love to travel. That's kind of been on hiatus, things going virtual. I live in central Wisconsin, near a place called Appleton, Wisconsin. I was a full-time staff children's pastor for 17 years. I've been married for 21 and a half years, counting by halves now because you can brag about it. That's like 400 years in Hollywood years. So now I write, I speak, and I really enjoy what I get to do because it's all about the kingdom. And this is actually where I record for my show. I do a show on kids ministry called The Peach Buzz, where we talk about things like first impressions. And so I'm coming to you from Appleton, Wisconsin.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dale, a lot of people know you. You were actually part of our very first Impressions Conference in 2018 in the spring. We did two in 2018, a spring and a fall, and you were a part of the children's ministry panel. If you missed that, go back and check out the 2018 conference. But Dale, welcome back.
Thank you, Greg. Glad to be here. A little bit about myself. Been in kids ministry for 31 years. Can you believe that? 31 years. Been married as well 31 years. The first 28 years I spent serving as children's pastors in local churches from Vegas to West Palm Beach, different places in the country. And then 3 years ago, I moved God opened the door for me to start investing in the Big C Church. So now I write and consult and coach and do conferences and all that good stuff. But name of my consulting business is Building Children's Ministry. You get more info at buildingchildrenministry.com. So that's what we do now. We love it. Just like Trish said, it's kind of been a little bit slower this year just because of the virus and stuff, but still doing a lot of stuff online. A lot of conferences that were going to be live have either went online or they're rescheduling for next year. So just getting ready writing and stuff for all that's coming. So glad to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, I read your blog every time it comes out. I was just reading it this morning about the largest children's ministries in the country, and you have a great blog and newsletter, and so I encourage people to subscribe to that and check out Trisha's show and Tom's podcast. And I've been on Tom's podcast as a guest, and so They're doing some killer stuff. These are people that are kingdom minded, Big C church minded, and are here to equip and resource the Big C church. And so they're here for you. And so when I had the opportunity to hear from experts in a specific area, I love to do panels. And so we've had a guest services panel, and our first year we had a worship panel, and then each year we've had a social media panel. I like to get these experts together and just have a little bit of group think. And so what I wanted to start with is there's no secret, when you're watching this, it's November 2020, and 2020 has been a crazy year. It's been a wild year. As we are recording this, there's hurricanes coming, and there's been earthquakes, and it's just been a crazy year. And so in the midst of that, the way we do or practice church as we have known it has changed for a lot of people. The majority of people across, and we have people all over the world that watch this conference, but for us that live in the U.S., for almost all of us, we have missed some portion of time, whether it be 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. For me now, it's been 6 months since I've been to my local church. How long that has been changes depending on where you live, but we've had to adapt and evolve and change and tweak and relearn and unlearn and do different stuff. And so I wanted to just talk a little bit about any lessons you've learned in this 2020 season. I'll start out. I was on a podcast recently, and I was saying that one of the things that I think, I was talking with Carrie Newhoff about this, and it was a thought I got from Larry Osborne at North Coast Church on a podcast that he shared, of maybe if none of us would ever say that we wanted to be like this or that this was our heart, our intention, but maybe over time we have become a little bit too building centric. And so that's one of my big takeaways in 2020 is we always say, well, it's not about just Sunday. It's not just about Sunday morning. But when Sunday morning got taken away and we're left with, well, now what do we do? And if for those of you that are watching that are on a church staff and you say, well, what is my job now? What do I do now? It left me thinking, do we place too much emphasis on Sunday morning? Are we too building centric? And what happens Monday through Saturday and the rest of the week? And are there other ways to connect with people? And so these are things that I've been thinking about and marinating on. We can go around and we'll reverse the order and start with Dale and go back around. But Dale, what are any lessons you've learned, any reflections, thoughts, takeaways in this wild year of 2020?
Yeah, it has been a crazy year. I did an article several years back about 5 questions that people are asking when they walk up to your church or get ready to enter. One of those questions was, will my kids be safe here? And I think that the pandemic has really upped that. They've got to know that their kids are going to be safe. If they don't, they won't come back. That's so important. So just being very proactive, and I think most churches are doing a great job of this, but be very, very proactive, letting parents know here's what's going to happen when you get to church. We're cleaning the toys between services, all the things you're doing to keep it safe. I think that's a big win, especially for where we're at right now. It was before even the pandemic, but now I think it's been amplified. So that's a big question. So, think through and answer that question by what you do and the policies and the procedures and stuff that you put out. So important, but it's really serious. This has hit me personally. My father is retired. He's 76. He was a pastor, supposedly retired, but still preached at weekends once in a while. He went to a church, small country church, but nobody in the church had masks on. And he caught the virus and almost died. He's in the ICU for 2 weeks, but just came home in the hospital 40 days. But it just reminded me that, man, we have got to make sure that things are safe and then we let people know. And, you walk in, I know Walmart, I don't know if Target's the same, but you have to have a mask to get in Walmart now. And they'll stop you at the door if you don't have one. So, what are we going to do to keep the ministry safe, keep the kids safe? And then how are we going to communicate that to the parents? Because I think that's a huge thing. They're not just comparing you to the church down the street. They're comparing you to the restaurant they went to, the store they went to. And so we've got to make sure that we're communicating, really important. So that's one big thing that's just kind of been amplified, is making sure that parents know their kids are safe.
Yeah, you touched on one huge theme in passing that I don't want to be lost on people, and that is communication.
Yeah.
Communicating the plan, the game plan. And I did a podcast for Rich Birch years ago on the Unseminary podcast, and I talked about children's ministries need to be clean, safe, and secure. And I echoed that in my book, that they need to be clean, safe, and secure. And never has that been so important as now, in a time where parents are wondering who has touched this toy and
Yeah.
whose mouth has been on this, and checking temperatures and all that. So that's a great observation. Trish, what are some lessons you've learned?
Yeah, I saw that whole thing on Facebook. I'm really glad that your dad's doing better, because
Thank
that
you.
was really super scary.
Was.
We were definitely praying.
Thank you.
One of the big things that I would say was a takeaway for me was that there can be good in a lot of different situations, that in the worst of situations, there can be some good that happens. For some churches, it forced them to have to use new technology.
Yeah.
It forced them to have to be more forward thinking. In kids ministry, I think sometimes we can be the pioneers in that area, because children are native technology speakers. That's their first language, along with English. Now, I know at 42, if I study technology the rest of my life, I will never be a native technology speaker, because I had to learn that later in life. I actually don't have that prowess, so I married it, which has helped me a lot in children's ministry. But what these churches have had to do, they have been forced to step out into that area. Children, I've said this many times, if you cannot speak their language, it's like you're putting all this work and all this effort and all this money into this program where you scream at them in Russian, and then you're upset that they don't follow what you just said.
That's good.
So we're actually missionaries, is what we are. We're missionaries to the next generation. So the first thing a missionary has to do is learn to speak the language and learn the culture. It's not the children that have to learn our language. It's up to us to learn their language. So this has been an opportunity as well. Now, I know Tom does personal coaching. I don't know if Dale does too, could be. I was actually doing coaching earlier this morning with a younger kids pastor, and she said the good news and the bad news is I have been given a completely fresh start.
Mm-hmm.
She's in Kansas, and she said, I feel like I'm starting from scratch. I'm completely starting from scratch, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. And so then the question that we were working on this morning was, what does that look like? What now do you want it to look like? What do you want to build it to be? Because you do have a chance for a fresh start. So I've learned in 2020 that you can find the good, you can find ways to change and get better and speak the language, and that you can make it a fresh start. You can leave behind some of the things that weren't working and move towards some things that may work so much better for your church. I will say, on the flip side, our church did not have great viewership of our online services. On the other hand, though, they're picking up views as time goes on, because you can access them anytime. So they're picking up more views as time goes on. And also, we had to get our act together and figure out how to do it effectively and professionally, and that takes a little time. So I see the pros and cons for each way, but this is the time where we have to learn.
I love it. I've talked about this for years, that we need to be digital missionaries. And as you said, missionaries learn to speak the language of the culture. Just the other night, I was sitting on the couch next to my 16-year-old daughter, who I'll look through Instagram, and I'll see her stories and things that she's doing and the way she's doing it. And I hate to say this because I'm active on social media. I've been on Facebook since the beginning, and Twitter since the beginning, and Instagram since the beginning, and I have a pretty good sized following, but I don't know all the ins and outs because I'm not a native, like Trish said. And so I asked my daughter, how do you do this on stories? She had story after story after story and all these breakup different things. And I had posted one story and just couldn't figure out how to add another one behind that. And she was like, you hit this little plus button right here. And so I'm not native. I didn't grow up with this. I don't know how they learn it, but they are native. Leonard Sweet has said that for years, talking about the natives. And so that's a great observation. Tom, what are you learning in this season?
Oh, wow. There's a lot. I mean, I think, and especially in children's ministry, we are learning the new technologies. There's a lot of children's ministers got into ministry to work directly with kids, to be storytellers and large group presenters. And now they're doing video editing and creating take-home boxes and all these crazy things. And so people are having to almost rewrite job descriptions. But I think for me, what I'm picking up, I run a Facebook group called Kids Ministry Collective, and we have the podcast. Of course, Greg, we had you on there talking about this whole idea of opening and what we should take into account children's ministry at whole church. And that was a really powerful podcast time. And we learned a lot after the discussions of some of those kind of things. And there's two kind of things that I've come across that I think resound with me. One is, this is an opportunity, and Trish kind of said it with her coaching student. I've been challenging people in the Kid Ministry Collective group and people that I consult with and coach with to stop working somebody else's model. Our churches are so stuck in the old models of how we do church. And when we had to pivot, and man, I hate that word sometimes, but unprecedented pivot. If I had never hear those words after 2020, I will be thrilled. But when we did pivot, we reacted. And our reaction was, hey, let's just take what we do and put it on camera and let's record it, and people will watch and people will appreciate all. And what we found in children's ministry circles is people started watching it first, then got screen fatigue, Zoom fatigue, just fatigue, COVID fatigue, of just being overwhelmed because all of a sudden their model of life changed dramatically. And the church, instead of changing our model, said, well, we're just going to keep going the same and expect the same results. And I really feel like this is an opportunity that God has allowed for us to engage with, to say, what's a new model and where can we go and what should we change to become more effective? And because we have a greater audience now, I mean, we're seeing that digital church hopping is at an all-time high. Churches are shifting attendance because people are shifting online and they're watching. I mean, I see it all the time. I'll do a watch party for my church and see 5 or 6 of my friends who I know attend other churches, but they're checking out my church too now, which they would never have taken a Sunday away to go visit my church, but they can now. But like I said, I think sometimes we're stuck in this idea that we have to keep working our models, the same model we always have. And I really think 2020 is teaching me it's time to stop working the old models. A lot of the models where you're working in children's ministry are 60s, 70s models, and it's time to shift that and to take advantage of that. I think the other thing is sustainable pace. I think a lot of leaders, we're seeing it. I'm seeing articles almost every day popping up on Facebook. I think Dale's even written a couple articles on burnout. And I know Trisha has, and she's got a heartbeat like mine. We're very concerned about leaders that are running so hard, they're running themselves right out of ministry. That's part of why Restoring Leaders is stepping up. I think that's why God's given me this vision for this season. Is there's a lot of leaders that just need to step out for a little bit and take a break and unplug and unwind and restore themselves. And so I think sustainable pace, leaders from the top down asking, what is a good sustainable pace? What can we do realistically in this season? And maybe we don't need to do everything. And maybe it is time to do a real simple church, change the model, change how we do it, simplify. I think a lot of our families would thank us for it. I think our volunteers would thank us for it. And ultimately, I think spiritually we would do better for it, because we could get back to the basics. And I think now is the time to start looking at how did the early church start? How did they operate? And move into that model a little bit harder, and embrace it and say, okay, maybe it's time for more home churches. And what will that look like? And that's scary for children's ministry leaders, because then they feel like, uh-oh, am I going to be needed? Yes, you're still going to be needed. There still needs to be shepherds of the young flock, as well as the older flock. So I think those two things, sustainable pace and working a new model instead of somebody else's model, and giving yourself permission to let go of the old and embrace that new, are two things that God has really just pushed in front of my heart this season.
That's good. That's good. I resonate with that. I used to run a nonprofit called Ex Pastors, EX Pastors, and it was for tired, hurt, burned out pastors and church leaders and church staff. And I've always had a heart for that and for renewal and retreats. And I'm so glad you're doing that. And I want to somehow be a part of that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk.
Yeah, that's a big passion of mine. But 10 years ago, I wrote a book called Strengths Leadership. It's the big orange one behind my head here. And that's the second edition. And in that book, I had a chapter on situation. And the book is about ways that innovation can come about, ways that innovation is born or birthed. And I talked about innovation can come through limitation, when you're limited and when your situation demands that you have to, as you said, pivot. And I shared the story of years ago when Seacoast Church in Charleston, South Carolina couldn't get approved for their new large auditorium. They came up with the idea of, well, I guess we need to start another venue, and started going multi-site. And then Seacoast became a pioneer and a trailblazer for the multi-site movement. And I shared a story from Greg Surratt and what they were doing at Seacoast. But they had tried to build a large auditorium that could seat thousands of people, and the city rejected it. And he came home and he was upset, and he said, hey, what are we going to do? We can't seat everybody. And multi-site was born and came out of that. And they have campuses in 3 states now. And so sometimes our limitation and our limits push us into different ways. And what I've seen in all areas of ministry, kids included, is we have had to lean into technology like never before. And for those people that pre-March didn't have a Zoom account, they have a Zoom account now. And we're learning how to adapt with these changes. And so with that, I want to talk about pastoral leadership. For those that, as you said, shepherd that next generation. You guys coach church leaders around the country. You consult with churches, and you have been in touch with people that are in the trenches that have had to adapt and change. And I have seen several churches. I was watching Elevation Church on Sunday, and the host said, and they had a countdown on the side of the screen. They had like a 3-minute countdown to when the kids experience started. And he said, if you go over to YouTube and click on the kids experience, it's starting in 3 minutes. And I've seen how people have had to adapt. But how have you seen kids ministers, children's ministers, kids pastors staying connected to their kids? And so, so much of ministry, as we know, is relational. It's people. Ministry is people, and there's a relational aspect. And so it's one thing to have a talking head on a YouTube screen or a Facebook Live or a Zoom. It's one thing to put on a program each week and to hit record. However, how are they staying connected to people in their ministry, whether it be phone calls or emails or letters, handwritten notes? What are they doing to stay connected to their flock? And so, Trish, we'll start with you. We'll just go around.
Well, one of the best ideas that I have seen actually came out of some of the churches. Most of the churches that have been able to reopen still have not opened their kids ministry. So they're opening the main service, but not the children's ministry part of it. So some of them had some pretty clever forward-thinking ideas there, and I completely agree. I've mentioned in my books that I really enjoy the family service concept, but shoving kids in an adult service and telling them to sit there and be quiet is not a family service. So my thought was, these adults are not going to die. They'll get over it. And when you have a family service, there needs to be elements for all ages. This is cross-generational ministry. This has to cross generations. And that's the approach we took at my church initially for the first several months, because we couldn't open the kids' church yet. Each family sitting by themselves, 6 feet apart, hand sanitizer, masks. We haven't done the temperature taking yet, but they are starting that here at the schools. So every family sitting together. We got rid of the greeting time. We don't pass an offering plate. That's a box in the back. And by the way, our offerings went up. I was just, I'm not promising anybody else that effect, but I don't know why that happened. But we put that in the back, and each family sits together, and instead of it being an adult service, we have the youth ministries helping with worship. The senior pastor has his 15-20 minutes, but then I also have 15-20 minutes that I'm either using puppetry or an object lesson, or I do ventriloquism, things like that, or I have the kids doing some kind of a skit. The adults loved it. They absolutely loved it. And then they knew exactly what their kids had learned because they participated in it. So what I'm suggesting is, you know, we talk about family ministry definitely, but when it's incorporated into the service, our adults had a lot of fun. And some of them said they even learned some things. We have some brand new Christians that they had never heard these stories before. And some of them said they never heard a simple salvation message before. So this took teamwork across the different realms of the church. This eliminates silos. So each area had to be able to work together to produce this service. And it was completely different, and people have loved it. Now I think we're all missing it a little bit. Now that and I thought we may need to bring this back at least periodically, because people have really enjoyed it. I also liked it because it wasn't saying, you know, kids ministry is out there somewhere else. It's, we are all part of this church. We are all on this same path. I would say for the churches that are still closed, a lot of them are doing care boxes where you ding dong ditch and you leave them on the doorstep and run away. I will say some of them tried Facebook, and that was not working very well because a lot of those kids are not on Facebook. The parents are, but not necessarily the kids. And so they'd have a Facebook where they showed the service live, and if the parent will put it up, that's fine. But most of these kids are not on Facebook. A lot of them aren't on Twitter either. But as you mentioned, I think, Greg, you mentioned Instagram.
Right.
They're mostly on there, for better or for worse. A lot of them have Instagram accounts and TikTok. So some of them found that their best bet was using Instagram, TikTok, sometimes Pinterest, YouTube. We used YouTube. But again, I'm behind the times. I was like, oh, because we have a Facebook page for our kids ministry, but that was only hitting the parents. And the parents have to then be ready to share it with their kids. That's another thing, is if you use TikTok, that's really short. You're going to have to be concise. You're going to have to take your lesson and really make an impact. Their attention span shortens every single generation. It's so short at this point. So TikTok is the favorite because they don't have to pay attention to anything for more than a few seconds. Isn't it like 90 seconds? Something like that. So that'll really make your kids' ministry. You have to make it that short. So I would say there's some great ideas and great opportunities happening out there. I have heard a lot of the Zoom fatigue, like Tom was mentioning. parents saying, I just am done. They've been on Zoom all day for school. I just am done right now. So we are having to use technology to the best of our ability. It's not always perfect.
That's good. I have 3 teenagers. None of them are on Facebook. I mentioned once, several months ago, to my oldest, who I assumed was on Facebook. Did you see this post I posted the other day? And she said, Dad, I'm not on Facebook. And I knew my younger 2 weren't, but they are, like you said, on Instagram and TikTok. And so that's the world we're living in. So if you, as a church leader, are going all in on Facebook to reach your kids' ministry, you may be missing them because they just don't have accounts. They're not on there. But you mentioned something in passing that I think is important too. You said school and Zoom fatigue, and so many kids are doing online school. And this has been a tough season. You know, we have come through the spring, the summer, and now fall. And so, Tom, let's go to you. What are you seeing people do to stay connected pastorally? How are they ministering to kids that, you know, some kids honestly struggle with online school and really miss being in the classroom, miss that attention from a teacher in person, and their grades have suffered, and they've so many kids and youth have experienced depression through this COVID season. And so let's just talk ministry and pastoral leadership. Tom, how are you seeing people stay connected with their kids and their ministry?
Yeah. Well, I told one of my coaching students, I want you to go and deputize all your small group leaders. Deputize, ordain them, commission them, whatever you want to do. Don't freak out just because I said ordain people, because I know there's a process for all that, whatever, but we're not getting into that. But you know what I mean? Unleash them, let them loose. Give them that commission to say, hey, we want you to go and pick up the phone and call the parents and say, hey, can I talk to your kid? I want to talk to them, even just for a few minutes. I know some people have done, the Zoom calls where they'll let parents schedule a Zoom call with a small group leader or the kid's pastor. Sometimes, they'll do that as a surprise thing. But I say, the phone still works. I think you can pick them up, and you can, as kids pastors, call your children and let them know, do something silly, even leave a silly voicemail if you don't get it, and let the parents play it for them. At least it lets them know, hey, I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you. I love you. I miss you. But I think honestly, getting out there, and I know it takes time. And I know, like I said, with all of the video editing and the boxes you're making up and all this, it's hard, but to set aside some time where you and your teams, volunteers, or even just you, schedule some time to go around. And I had a good friend of mine that did this, and I absolutely loved this idea. I started sharing it all over the Kid Ministry Collective. Was that he had parents where they signed up, and then they used this app to schedule and create a map, and they literally went house to house for 7 minutes. They timed this thing out, 7 minutes at each house, where they drove around. They jump out of the cars. It was a multi-site church, so the 4 campus leaders came together with him, and they jump out, blast this music on the stereo system out of the truck. They had popsicles, and they just screamed and yelled and honked horns until the kids came out, and they had this little 7-minute dance party. And then they left a little box that had some goodies in it and some popsicles, and then they took off. And I'll tell you, the reaction that he got, I saw it on his own social media page. The parents went wild, just saying, you don't know how much that made my kid's day, because you came to our house. And yeah, the parents scheduled it. Some of them, they didn't. They just showed up because it was close by, and they knew that church family lived there. So they went anyway. I think stuff like this, where you are calling and you're letting kids know, because they need to hear, that's one of those basic needs for a child, is they just need to know that they're cared for and they're loved and that they can be heard. And so, just like I say, a simple phone call, a simple run by the house. I saw another children's pastor that literally would just bring a chair and sit out on the lawn and talk to the kids for a few minutes, and then, and have a popsicle with them, or a pop or whatever, or a juice box. And then they would move on. I think we can't neglect those simple little things. I don't think we need the big flashy, all the gizmos and gadgets in the boxes. I think just the personal shepherding is so important. That relationship is huge right now. And so I think deputizing your team and taking the time, making the time. I mean, I would rather lean into some video-based curriculum and let that do the whole teaching for a month and spend my month going around and talking to my kids. That to me is better, and a better investment of my time and my energy and my calling for ministry. That's me being a pastor than me creating content, which there's already tons of content out there that's fantastic. So why, again, lean into something new and say, I'm going to let the electronic content teach. I'm going to go spend my time during the week and on the weekends going and just caring for my people, listening to those kids. How are you doing? How's life? What scares you the most about going out back to school online or doing the mix or back and forth? How does that feel? How does it feel to have somebody walking around like this all the time, and all you can see is, I think that is huge, to just spend that time. And I think it's vital that we get back into doing some of that stuff. Don't let COVID scare us away from the kids. Let it push us to them.
That's good.
Yeah, that's real good. And there's so much to the heart of, like you said, of shepherding. And I see this with all mixed gen, with all student ministry.
Yes.
My middle child, my son, Tommy, is a senior in high school. This is a terrible senior year. They have an A day, B day. So he's going to school 2 days a week, seeing half of his peers based on their last name. Are you A through L or M through Z? And so half of his class in his senior year, his last year, he doesn't even get to lay eyes on because they have different last names. And so it's just kind of a bummer. Dale, how are you seeing people connect and shepherd and minister and pastor?
Yeah, I mean, I think the things that Tom mentioned, I've seen a lot of churches doing that, going to their houses and maybe having a poster, "We love you," and going by. Talking about relationships, one thing that did, I say surprise me, but this has forced churches to go online with their kids ministry. Before this, I knew maybe one or two ministries that had online stuff for kids, but now anybody you talk to has got online stuff. I think the tension is when things get back to normal, our church is going to continue online for kids. And every church I've talked to says we're going to keep doing online stuff. I think there's a tension there because I don't think that anything can take the place of sitting down, looking somebody face to face and say, "I'm so glad you're here," hearing their name called. I think it's so important. And also asking these churches, are you going to have the bandwidth, like Tom was talking about, all the editing, are you going to have the bandwidth to do this long term? And so I think there's a tension there. Are we going to continue online service? Because we all are feeling the pressure of families coming to church less and less, right? And I'll never forget, there was a Sunday that a dad came in with his daughter, and he looked kind of grumpy. I said, "How's your day going?" He said, "Well, I was going to stay home and just watch it online, but she wouldn't let me. My daughter drugged me up here." And so I'm just wondering, long term, as things again get back to normal, how's it going to flush out with churches doing stuff online? Is it going to be another excuse for families not to show up in person? But I just don't think there's anything that can take the place of personal discipleship. Can it happen over a computer? Of course. But I still think there's a tension there that, man, we get back to normal. We've got to get the kids face to face and be there for them and talk with them. I think it's so important. I don't think anything can take the place of that. Is it valuable to do online stuff? Of course it is. Does it make a difference? Yes. But I think the best scenario is for them to be there in person, face to face.
That's good. I remember years ago at the Catalyst Conference, Andy Stanley talked about, his message was the tension is good. So wrestling with these tensions that are viable tensions of technology and online ministry mixed with in-person and face-to-face, and the tension is good. And so speaking of technology, as we're coming down the home stretch, I want to talk about, is there anything you guys are seeing practically and as far as systems and procedures and protocols, things that churches are doing for pre-registration and check-in, trying to make the Sunday morning experience as streamlined as possible, as efficient as possible? Is there anything you guys have seen or learned or caught, or tools, applications, things that you're seeing that people are using to pre-register before they ever arrive so that Sunday morning can be streamlined and efficient. And so Dale, we'll go right back to you. Or what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of churches that were progressive, they already had that in place. You could register before you show up. I don't have a lot of experience with that, so I really don't know if I could speak into that. I would default to Trish and Tom. Maybe you've heard something, but I haven't really heard anything outside of the normal registration process.
Okay, Trish, what about you?
I'll be honest, our parents have been horrible about not pre-registering, and you'd think they would like to. I'm a parent myself. I also have a senior this year, and then my daughter's a freshman. I really dreaded that long line on Sunday mornings. You have that many kids coming in. We would run with the sites about 600 kids all trying to check in, and we were streamlining it. And then a word about first impressions, you want to be able to give your attention to those guests, the new people. And you've got this, you don't want them waiting in that long line. So we had, several kiosks and stations that were for parents that we knew that were already registered online. They were just printing it out there. And then we had one that was just for new visitors. So the guest services desk was just new visitors. I think that now this is going to be even more important because like Dale was saying, that was so good about they need to know that it's safe, especially then if some churches are adding the, checking for masks and taking temperatures as well. That adds more time. So anything you can do to cut down that time, because as we know, we're pushing for every minute we can get. You don't want people standing waiting in lines. If you can get them to pre-register at home, see, I would have loved that. I would have gone for that definitely because it would have saved me time when I got there. But a lot of our parents don't. I think I don't know. We've had issues with that when we were doing an outing or camp or anything of the above where 2 days before, even though we were, I think we trained them one way and we need to train them a different way. Does that make sense? Someone trained them this way. Someone trained them to do this way, and they're going to need to be trained to do it another way because I know like where I live, at least the schools would not allow that. You can't call the night before and, well, you're taking my kid. They have a registration deadline and all of that. I wish we could get parents to register before they got to church. That would really help. Now, where I live, we do not have that, at least right now, while we're talking now, we do not have that restriction anymore of less. It had been under 50 people. It had been under 50. And so we were talking as a staff, we tell our families to stay home and like our own personal families, and what do you do if more than 50 show up? Say, go home, no Jesus for you today. But we could say, we said we'd get our good members, our solid members, we'd explain it to them and have them go home. But pre-registration would have helped us tremendously. I wish more parents would do pre-registration. I think it would take some training to get that across, but it would be worth it.
Yeah, I'm seeing it all across the board where depending on what state you live in, we were talking off camera. I was talking with Kerry Newhoff, and he was saying in Canada, they have a capacity of, I think it's either 5, maybe 10, but I think it was 5 people that could gather at once. And in California, I think has a rule of 50 or 100 that it can't be over that. And so that's theirs. And then some people have like a percentage. It can be 25% of your seating capacity. And so the way to manage that pre-Sunday is to pre-register. And so churches are using Eventbrite and iTickets and Planning Center and having people register ahead of time to say, we're going to come to the 9:30 service. And then they realize, okay, we're at capacity. We need to open up another service. We've already got too many people because they're trying to abide by local and state guidelines. And so, Tom, what are you seeing?
Yeah, well, thankfully here in Ohio, we're not that we can still meet pretty good. Our state's doing fairly well. But one of the things I'm seeing, and I was really excited about hearing, I think it was Planning Center, or it could have been Kid Check. One of those two check-in systems has a setup where you can set it up on your website to have parents pre-register, and then it sends them a barcode kind of thing, a QR code. And so when they get to church, all they've got to do is scan that, and immediately they're checked in and their labels are printed. And I like stuff like that. I think that is expedient. I think that's good for everybody to use, whether they're new or not. I think communication, to get people to use this kind of stuff, it just, yeah, like Trisha said, it's communication, it's training, it's getting some of your key families prepped and ready so that they're modeling it and they're doing it, and that kind of thing. But I like hearing that some of these churches are going to this. I hope they don't go back to the old system. I think that's a positive way of, because most people know that the first impression, of a church, a lot of it starts online. People are going to go to the website. Young millennials and stuff, they're looking at your website first. And what does that look like? And they're going to go to the children's ministry page, and they're going to look for those things you said, Greg. Is it safe, secure, clean? Does it show that on the website? Does it say that what you're doing there? But I think also having a spot where it says, if you're planning on coming Sunday, here's what you do, and you can pre-register right here. I think some parents will take advantage of that because they don't want to stand in line. And part of being new is I don't want to stand out and be embarrassed anyway. So I would rather just blend in and look like I know what I'm doing. So I think some families will take advantage of that if it's there, if it's made very, click easy, one click, 2 clicks max, gets you to where you need to be. Type in your info, don't make it a long form, short, quick, to the point, and then give them that code where they're going, hey, wow, this church. And I think any size church can do this. I think small churches think they can't have this kind of technology, but you can and you should, because it's just going to help. If you want to draw more families to your church, you got to show that you're with it and that you're capable of handling those kind of things. And so I've seen some churches that are going to those kind of models. And if a service is full, because you can set the limit, then it would shift to saying this service is full, you can go to this one, that kind of thing. So I think that's what I've been seeing so far around in my world, is that churches are starting to use, and some of these programs like Planning Center, Kid Check, Eventbrite, they're starting to get those kind of setups for churches to plug in and put on your website so that all you got to do is scan it and go. And I love it. I think that's great.
That's good. I worked with, earlier in the year, I worked with a software company that was developing a brand new plan your visit model. And we were working on pre-registration and kids check-in and planning your visit. And then now in this COVID season, I'm seeing a lot of churches really lean into plan your visit. It was getting popular pre-COVID. A lot of churches were doing a plan your visit and having where they could just fill out their name and info. And I used to, as I secret shopped, I would go to churches and fill out their registration ahead of time and get a tour on Sunday morning. But now in this COVID time, where you need to maybe get a seat or make sure you have a reservation because of capacity issues or seating issues, a lot of people are really leaning into plan your visit. And so I want to go around the horn one last time. We're wrapping up. This is the end. It's been a great panel, very informative, very insightful, very meaningful. Let's talk about just if you could just leave people with a thought. This is all about first impressions. This is the First Impressions Conference. As Tom just said, for most people, their first impression starts online. However, when they come and step foot on the campus, if they have kids, children's ministry is a huge part of a parent's first impression. I remember years ago, Mark Waltz from Granger Church wrote the book First Impressions, and he talked about from the parking lot to the kids check-in, somewhere in those first 10 minutes that pass, they're going to make up their mind whether or not they're coming back. And he said they need to know that they matter to us before they hear they matter to God. And so somewhere in that first 10 minutes, people are making up their mind. And every church I've been to, having kids, in those first 2 minutes, my kids are involved. And it's there may be amazing music and incredible preaching, but if my kids didn't have a good time, we're probably not coming back as a family. And so, Trish, let's start with you, and let's just go around and give people just a word of a nugget or wisdom or a thought on why kids ministry matters in the realm of first impressions.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the research shows, and I've showed the different studies on my website or in my book. The research shows that it was something like 81% of all brand new families make up their mind whether or not they're going to come back in the first 5 minutes. So that's scary. That's scary to me. In the first 5 minutes, they've already decided we're coming back or we're not doing this again. If you think about that, most of a church's budget dollars, attention, time, and rehearsal is going to go to their worship service and the message. And I'm not saying that's bad, but in 5 minutes, they have not heard your worship pastor yet. They have not heard the worship team. They have not heard the sermon. They probably haven't even seen the sanctuary yet. So what are they basing their decision on? Well, they're basing their decision on your parking lot greeters, your greeters at the door. I think a lot of senior pastors listening to this right now, you just went, oh no, yes. And what are they going to see next when they walk through those doors? Your kids' ministry check-in. Your children's ministry check-in. In those first 5 minutes, yes, they will be at your children's ministry check-in. So who you have working there is extremely important. You want your A game.
Yeah, best and the brightest.
Yes, those big smile, welcoming people that can give them a tour and answer their questions. You need to have a streamlined system in place. If they're standing in line forever, if their 5 minutes are spent in line, I doubt you're going to get them back. So it's time for churches to start putting more of their budget, time, and attention toward what people are actually going to see in those first 5 minutes.
Amen. I agree. I believe it wholeheartedly. Tom, tell us what your thoughts are.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give Dale a shout out. Buy Dale's book on if Disney ran your children's ministry.
That's awesome. Buy Dale's book. Yes.
Because seriously, Dale nails it when you want to give. I know some people are going to flare about this, but don't get triggered. But think about the environment when you walk into Disney. The sight, the smell, the sounds, everything, all your senses are totally engaged. As churches, I think that's the same thing. We have to make sure if we're going to be in the children's ministry department, especially, and like Trisha just said, you got 5 minutes. I think it's honestly less than that. If you walk in and you immediately have to shuttle your kids down to the basement, okay, that first off sends like, uh-oh, where am I going? But I've seen basements. I've seen the whole staircase start setting the tone. Again, think about Disney's entrance, their cues, their line cues. I hope I'm not stealing Dale's thunder, darn it. But everything leads to that place. And when you walk in and you're there, and yes, you do need to have your A game people. You need those people that aren't afraid to have fun, to be silly, to be inviting. You don't want people to have to wait for them to come to them. You want them going to the visitors, and boom, you're there, you're being greeted, not used car salesman attack mode. That'll scare them off the other way. But that balance of reading the person that comes in, knowing whether this is a more extroverted family or introverted family, and then setting the tone there. Because you watch Disney people, they read it. They read their people. They read their guests as they come in. And I think that's huge. So I think if churches can focus on thinking about how they're training their first impressions team when it comes to the children's ministry, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it smells like, those are huge things that will make or break your first impression when it comes to kids ministry, because they will judge everything after that based on that experience, because that'll be their impression of what their kids are going to experience back when they go behind those doors. And it may not be. You may have an amazing killer environment with a fantastic stage and a fantastic crew and volunteers back there. But if the parents walk in and go, what's happening to my kids back there? And are they safe? And are they secure? And wow, well, man, what is that smell? Yeah, I mean, that's going to destroy everything.
That's good. And you and Trish are both saying the same thing. And Dale, we're going to give you the final word. But that is such a, I was on a podcast and I was talking about one, this is just obvious, but it's got to be said. And I say this every year. People in children's ministry need to love kids. That should just be a no-brainer. But they need to actually love kids and not see it as a torture or burden to, oh my gosh, I have to serve in the nursery. They need to love kids and love children. And my favorite are those that bend down on their eye level and say, my name's Greg, what's your name? Welcome. And get there face to face. But you have to love children. Like Trish said, put your best and your brightest up front in those first 5 minutes. Dale, we're going to end with you. Bring us home. What do we need to remember when it comes to first impressions in kids ministry?
I think what has come to my mind is this. The Bible talks about going the second mile. And I believe this is the time where we have to go the second mile if we're going to really reach families. When you go to a restaurant or a place of business and they give you incredible service, you walk out and just go, wow, man, that was awesome. We're coming back there. I couldn't do this for all the kids, but we try to do this for one kid a week. One of the guests, I would tell our greeters or people that were walking back to the room, ask them some questions as you're walking them to the room. What's their favorite candy? What sports do they play? Find out something about that kid. And then come back and tell me what you found out. Let's say the kid liked M&Ms and played basketball. Myself or someone else would go out and jump in our car, drive to Target, get a big old huge bag of M&Ms, get a new basketball. And when those new parents came to pick that child up, we said, we were just thinking about you. We know you like M&Ms, so here you go. I know you like basketball, so here's a basketball for you. So just doing things, like that, just to
Love it.
Help people see that you're going the second mile. Because they will respond to that and they'll be back. And so I think, again, this is our chance, our opportunity to go the second mile, whatever that looks like for your ministry, man, go the second mile. That's where things really happen. And there's not it's not crowded on the second mile, by the way. There's plenty of room on the second mile if you want to go down that route, but just, man, going all out for kids and families, whatever that means for your church, giving it everything you got to make them feel welcome, because we're welcoming them to Christ is what we're doing, right? Our goal is to see them come to Christ and know him. So it all sermon starts in the parking lot, as they say.
That's so good. It makes me think of that Andy Stanley concept of do for one what you wish you could do for all. And so just making some kids' day, making their day special. I remember the first time we went to Disney, my daughter, Katie, our youngest, it was her birthday. And they gave her a badge that said, today is my birthday. And it had her name Katie on it. And every place that we went to Disney, every event, every ride, every attraction, every restaurant, when we walked in, they would say, happy birthday, Katie, happy birthday, Katie, happy birthday, Katie, happy birthday, Katie. Everybody could see because she had that button on. And I've seen where children's ministries have given kids a special something to identify them as a first-time guest, so they can say, welcome, Joey, glad to have you, and make somebody's day. Do for one what you wish you could do for all. So Dale, Trish, Tom, thank you guys. You've poured so much into our attendees this year. And it all starts here. This is where we set kids on their spiritual journey and in their path and their walk with Christ. And so it's so vital, so important, way beyond just, do they like our church? Is this a good first impression? This is the start and the foundation of their spiritual life. And so thank you guys for pouring into our audience.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.